Good morning. Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We are in the middle of page 1263, Aleph Resh Samach Gimel. And after the previous paragraph, and 1261 and 1262, where he talked about the nature of Simcha and joy, and put it together, transcending, breaking through barriers, boundaries. In this paragraph that begins on 1262, example of all this, from that we'll understand above. And he gave a very concise summary of Seder Shtalshlus, which, as I mentioned, is not often described quite in this fashion. A very balbatish, a very as I said, concise picture of how Seder Shtalshlus, by definition, is both in its macrocosm and microcosm, meaning all levels, is structured by, it has a structure, and by parameters that is defined by and measured by the kav that goes from Eid Ein Sof, and it measures for each level of the hierarchy and of the whole structure of the cosmic order exactly what it needs, not more, not less. So that defines structure, and it's fundamental. It's not an incidental definitions and parameters. It's very much part and parcel of the very essence, intrinsic to the very essence of the structure of existence. And he broke it down into many parts, but generally, before higher than Atzilus, has levels, and within each of them are many levels, all the way to the point that he counted in the Galgalta, in this level of the skull of Arich, 13,000 worlds, which aren't exactly words, but dimensions, we'll say. Then in Atzilus, the 10 spheres of Atzilus, which also break down into detail. Before Atzilus, you have the Atzmus HaKav, the very core of the power line, the very core essence of the main power line of the Kav. In Atzilus, it's a reflection of the Kav, but still a direct reflection of the very core, but it's one step away. And that's why it's Muhusa Ur. You get the very personality of the Ur, but it's not the Etzem itself. It's like a reflection of. And there too, there are levels, Ma'ila Mata, Chachma, Bina, and they're distinguished both in quantity and quality, and their qualitative differences, what we call the hierarchy of higher and lower. And all this is based on the medida, the measurement, and the allocation of resources all the way Malchus of Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, when God first envisioned existence. So he defined all this. So all these definitions didn't begin in the Kav. It began even before the Tzimtzum, God envisioning it all, what he calls Shakach Ola B'Ritzene V'Shir Ba'atzmei B'Koyach. That's how it desired, God desired. And he allocated within himself the resources, so to speak. The revelation should be in such and such manner, exactly by these parameters. And that's the Haggadah of every level, from higher Atzilus, and then he concludes, and also below Atzilus, Biyah. There, you don't have even the reflection. Now it's called Shel Tulda. Shel Tulda means the has now been transformed into another paradigm. So it still originates from the but it's no longer a reflection of the original. It's now one of the examples given yesterday by Eliezer, a lithograph from a painting, or other examples you can use. That's a Shel Tulda, and you only have the Mitzias, not the Mohus. Through the of Biyah, you only know the existence of the entity of God in this case, but not the personality. In Atzilus, you have personality, a reflection. Higher than Atzilus, you have the core, but also remember, it's after the Tzimtzum, so it's all still the divine within structure. Everything here is divine within structure. We're not talking here about the divine beyond structure. In structure, you could have the Etzem HaKav, the Ha'ara of the Kav, or the Shel Tulda. The core power line, a reflection of it, or a so-called replica of it, if you wish, or a second a reflection of a reflection, if sometimes the expression is used. And yes, in that world, you cannot have the very core or the reflection of, because they would not, because if you had it, it would not be able to exist. Because for it to exist, it has to have the kav amida. So not atzilus and not higher than atzilus, not the reflection of the mahus and not the mahus itself. That's where we stopped. So we have now a summation of Seder Ishtalshus and its structure. And this is setting the tone now on the stage for understanding. So what does Simcha do? If this is the structure, remember we said Simcha does what? It goes beyond the structure. It transcends the barriers and the boundaries and the parameters. So now he's going to explain what Simcha does to Seder Ishtalshus. So he says, so I'm starting from the line. This is 7 lines from the top of the page. The line starts Gile Mamish, page 1263, Aleph Resh Samach Gimel. And you could find these pages at ayinbeis.com. So he says now like this. However, by the Simcha Elyena, by the supernal, the higher Simcha, joy, the B'chinas Atzmus Ein Sof, that of the level of Atzmus Ein Sof, that's in a state of Simcha. Obviously, it doesn't mean physical Simcha, it means figuratively, but it's in an exalted state, in an elevated state, as he's going to explain. Where do you find Simcha Lamaila? Simcha Lamata, we know. We are joyous, we dance, we celebrate at our child's wedding, or different examples of joyous and celebratory occasions. What about Lamaila? Where do you see it? Kamay b'yem chasanose, u'b'yem simchas libay. So there's a pasuk that says clearly in Shir Hashirim, b'yem chasana, the day of his marriage, and the day of the gladness of his heart, simchas libay. And Chazal say on it in Tainus, this is Yem Chasanos is Zemat and Torah, Yem Simchas Libay is Ayin Beis Hamikdash. So in other words, in history, there are events that are reflective of Simcha. Matan Torah was called Yem Simchase. Yem Chasanose. And the Chasan, not just of the Jewish people, is the Chasan of the Neshamas, the Jewish people with God. So you see the concept of Simcha, both Chasanose and Simchas Libay, Lamaila. And what happened? And another pasuk he brings to prove that there's Simcha Lamaila. This is in Tehillim. Ukma Yismach Hashem b'maisav. That God rejoices in his actions, in his creations. This is one of the 12 psukim, Mamor Chazal, that the Rebbe established in 1976 for children to say at different occasions and like Bema parades and so on. And one of them is the Tanya that says that the Eibush is Sos B'Sameach, that God has joy from us making a Dira B'Tachtenim, and Yismach Hashem B'Maisav is God's joy in us, and there's Yismach Yisrael B'Osav is our joy, B'Osav in our Creator, in our Maker. But here we're focusing on God's joy. So we see the concept of Simcha. What does this mean that God is B'Simcha? So he's going to now translate it in the language of Seder Ishtalshus that we just discussed. So what does it do? Go back. However, after explaining the structure of Ishtalshus and its very consistent and defined order and routine structure, so now when the Simcha Yen of Atzmus Ein Sof, like he just gave, he said, Yem Chaslas Yem Simchas Libi. What does that do? How does that geder ha'gabola that pierces through or breaks through the hageder ha'gabola, the boundaries and of the limitations, the boundaries of the parameters. And that would cause, and there should be a revelation of divine energy in the entire cosmic order. Not at all measured by the parameters and definitions and boundaries at all of Seder Ishtalshus. So everything we learned about before higher than Atzilus and lower than Atzilus, and even though the Kav is very measured of how much it gives energy to each level, like we said in general, Atzmus HaKav, the core of the Kav, or reflection of it, or reflection of a Tulda, an offspring of it. So he says Simcha, in a sense, is like I mentioned, the express train, like bypasses it and creates a surge that goes through the whole Seder Shtalshlus without any hakbalas. It basically does not limit itself to that regular flow. Like we see, generally speaking, during the year, for instance, you have a day like Rosh Hashanah, you have Yom Kippur, you have Sukkot, you have Simchas Torah. You have other days, you have Chanukah, Purim, Pesach, Shavuos. These are special days. The rest of the year are what's called Yemei Achel, regular days. There's also obviously Avodas Hashem, we serve God every day, but it's more in the parameters of the weekday, not Shabbos, or not a Yom Tov. It comes a Yom Tov, what happens? There's a certain elevation in the whole presence, all of existence, including every person. So Simcha is a state of this higher state of revelation that, in a sense, like he says, the goes in whole shashtalshus without the usual limitation and parameters at all. Now, we still need to understand what that means. Is that a permanent state? Is it a temporary thing? What happens with the structure of ishtalshlus? He didn't explain all that. He's just saying, introducing what Simcha does. So just like in a human being, the day of the marriage of your only child or any other special celebration is different than a regular day. I don't just mean day, the time that you're in a state of Simcha. What does it do? It opens you up and you go outside of your regular standards and your regular even nature. Like the person who's stingy becomes a giver. You reveal deeper things. You go beyond your regular structure. So the same thing, Lamailo, there's the regular structure, which isn't so regular, but meaning it's defined. And Simcha brings a level of gili that in the Kol Ishtalshlus, the Leibchinis Hakbol of Agdara Klal. It brings from Zayah Cheli Gimel, the third volume, Zayah part 3, Daf Kuv Beis, Amid Beis, 102b, Al Pasuk B'chamisha Asur Yem, that on the pasuk it says B'chamisha Asur Yem is referring, I believe, to Sukkot. On the 15th day, the Bahai Yema, says the Zohar. On that day, Yosef Malka B'Tara. Tara is Shar, gate. The king sits in his Shar, in his gate. Shar, in other words, there's the king inside his inner chamber, and there's the king sitting beside him in his gate, the gate of his either palace or his city. He's going to explain. Ukshahari inyan ha-melucha. The inyan of melucha is the inyan of kingship. Hu inyan haremimuz v'agdula. What is a king? A king is an exalted, he's a higher state, an elevated state. Lias muvdil min ha'am, in a state where he's removed from and apart from his nation. He's not one of the common folk. He's above and apart from them. Sheyeshev behechale, he sits in his chamber. Hechale means his inner chamber. Ve'ena misra klal ela'am, and he doesn't show, it doesn't make any appearance. He doesn't appear or show himself to the nation at all. He's in his own private inner chamber, inner sanctum. Rak le'es minaitim, only from time to time. Let's say the eze inyan gadol. He makes an appearance for a very important reason. He'll make an appearance to the nation, to the people. So besides him being exalted, period, he's also removed. They don't even see him. He doesn't show himself to them, except the inyan gadol. He doesn't say what that can be. That can be a coronation. It could be a special event. We see when a king makes an appearance in the history, that was considered a big event. People came to see the king.
Melech b'yafyoi techezeno einenu.
Yeah, Melech b'yaf, the king in his beauty, we see with our eyes. So he makes a special appearance. Now, ukamoy kain, and so too, einem boy melov ki im al yidei kriya. Nobody approaches the king without being summoned. You don't just come over to the king. Like it says in the Megillah. If a person approaches the king without being called and summoned, achaz dose, he forfeits his life. It's basically considered a merida b'malchus. It's considered defying, rebelling against the king. Achaz dose. You're breaking the rule, the cardinal rule of a king, respecting a king. So this is a melech on his own. So number one, he's in his own inner place. First of all, Reimamus, he's beyond and above and removed from the nation. He's in his own inner sanctum and chamber. He only comes out at certain occasions. You don't approach him without being summoned. All showing the distance of the king. Aval be'es uzman hasimcha. So now the Rebbe Rashab is explaining the Zohar. What does it mean on the 15th day? The Eibishter comes out, the Melech comes into the gate. So he's explaining what that means. Be'es hasimcha, be'es v'zman hasimcha. In a time and a period of joy, kasher yismach be'pnimius nafshe, when the king is celebrating from his inner soul. Again, we're not talking about a superficial simcha. We're talking about a very fundamental, the core simcha. He leaves his inner sanctum, his chamber, to reveal himself at the gate of the king. So the expression Shar HaMelech. Shar HaMelech often refers to, especially Shar HaMelech, means a kingly gate, gate that I remember when I was in Petersburg, St. Petersburg. So they show there's a very, very wide highway, wider than anything you've ever seen, like maybe 50 lanes, maybe even more, 60 lanes. And they said this was called the Shar HaMelech. In English, they called it the King's Gate. So I saw it with my own eyes. This was when King Peter the Great of Russia. So when the troops would go out to war, so he would escort them to this gate. So it was very malchusdik. It wasn't just a highway. It wasn't even a super highway. Massive. Like you really saw, like a very big area. And they called it Shar HaMelech, the gate. So the king comes out, and of course it's very kingly, very malchusdik. I'm not saying that, I don't want to give example from Peter the Great. I just wanted to say that there's the concept of the king's gate, the gate of the king. So basically, let me speak. Let me finish. So the king is inside of his chamber, and then when the be'es hasimcha, bezman be'es zman hasimcha, when he's internally in the inner words, he's in a great joy. He comes out from his chamber into the galus to be revealed in Shar HaMelech le'ein koil, for all to see. For all to see, v'yasa mishta, and he throws a party. He throws a celebration, a mishta, a feast, u'mesameach imam, and he rejoices with them. Like similar, like the Megillah talks about Achashverosh. So the Melech has now gone to a very different state. Here, the Melech, the king, is removed and hidden and beyond and not available, and definitely not revealed to his people. They're not allowed to access him. Simcha changes the entire status, or the entire, I would say, stature, the entire demeanor of the king, and now he's coming out from his inner chamber into being revealed to all. That's what the Zohar says, because what's the meaning that he goes out into his gate? So the Rebbe Rashab explained now elaborately what that means. Goes out to his gate. That is the mashal. Now he goes, and so too is above by the Eibishter. He's going back now to Yem Chasanose, Yem Simchas Liboy, Yismach Hashem. Just like the king that he says in the Zohar, so he says the same thing Lamaila. The Bizman Moyadim L'Simcha, which he's referring to the 15th of the month, is Moyadim L'Simcha, generally Moyadim L'Simcha, but especially Sukkot. So in the time of Moyadim L'Simcha, the holidays that are designated for joy, Moyadim comes from the word also Yud. It means like a designated spot or a designated moment in time. Malka Betara. The Malka is in the gate, like he said in the Zohar. In a state of being revealed to all. Like he says, he writes in the Kutatera, Be'inyan Yom Tov Sheni, where he talks about the Yom Tov Sheni. I believe it's in the Maimorim of Shmini Atzeres. So he says, Shezeu k'moy hamishta l'kol ha'am hanimtzoyim b'chatzar ginas bisan hamelech. That the Yom Sheni, which is, in this case, Yom Sheni could be Yom Shev Sheni Shel Goliath, but regardless, in the Inyan there, he talks about that state is like a mishta l'kol ha'am. It's a celebration or like a feast and a for the entire nation, Hanimtsayim, that are found, and he's using the lashon from the Megillah, B'chetzad ginas bisan hamelech. In the Chetzad is the Chatzar is a
Courtyard.
Courtyard, yeah, the courtyard in the courtyard of the king's palace. So courtyard is outside of the palace. So that just demonstrates again that it's all about expression, extension, revelation beyond the norm that you usually have in the regular routine situation. V'zeu gamkein. Now he's going further. This is also Malka Betara, Malka in the gate, Yosef. That this is also the inyan of the Malka sitting in the gate. B'pchinas teisvus er ba'atzilus u'b'biyah ad lamata mata. He's adding another point now. Till now, we've spoken about that during a time of joy, the king expresses itself outside of his palace. It looks like he's also adding now that the gate is referring to an abundance of energy going into Atzilus and Biyah all the way to the lowest levels. So in other words, in a regular situation, Atzmus HaKav, the core power line of the Kav, radiates higher than Atzilus. And there are too many levels, as we learned. In Atzilus, it's a reflection. In Biyah, it's a tulda. It's another jump, another leap. Like a light that goes through a serious filter or a serious partition, called the parsa, the partition. But when there's so besides the fact that the king is more revealed during Simcha, it also Tada refers to the gate that's outside of the palace, which would seem to imply that the palace is like higher than Atzilus. And now there's an abundance of energy going outward into Atzilus and all the way to Biyah, all the way below. So it's just, I think, another diuk in why the Zohar calls it a gate. So first, it's just a gate to say that he's not no longer in his own inner domain. He's revealing himself. But it also refers to, he says, that's what he says. It says like this. So it's also referring to the more a flow of energy in Atzilus and Biyah. Okay. Now in the parentheses, I'm going to stop shortly for questions or comments. Ubizman Habayis, says the Rebbe Rashab, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, Hoyebegili Mamish ben Neshamas Lamata. By Moedim L'Simcha, by a holiday, when it was more festive and celebration, so this was actually more revealed. Godliness was more revealed than the Neshamas below. Shezeh Inyan Mitzvah Sriya B'Gimel Regolim. That was the mitzvah. What is the mitzvah? The mitzvah of Alil Regel. 3 times a year, it says, Sholosh Shan Pamin B'Shana, you shall make a pilgrimage. You should go up and make a pilgrimage to Yerushalayim, to the Beis Hamikdash. And the Chazal say, the Kashem Shebal Lires, Kach Bal Lires. Just as you come to be seen, you also come to see. What are you seeing? So you're not only coming to be seen by God, you're also seeing God. Because during Zman Habayis, there was actually a divine revelation, the Sham is below. So today, Emoedim L'Simcha is basically saying, even though there's a Simcha L'Mayla, and it's also so-called a surge greater than Ishtalshus, but you don't see it visibly. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the Neshamas below actually saw this gilui, this extra gilui that came all the way down from the place of Simcha, from the Pnimis Nefesh of L'Mayla. And that means mitzvah sriya. Riya means revelation. And that they saw something. Now, and what is the reason for all of this? Okay, that's a parenthesis just to explain Zman Habayis compared to now. But then he says, going back to what he said initially. Why is this happening? Why is this cause this type of extra revelation? Because joy reveals the inner and the core, dafka, the inner and the core. In this case, of course, of Elikus, of godliness. Valkain, and because it reveals that, that's why it pierces and transcends and breaks through. I mean, all these good words, the Geder Hagdara, the very parameters of this structure, or you could say the boundaries of the parameters of the Kav Chut that we learned before. The Kav Chut is a measuring. It measures the flow. It's very specific. That causes Bechinas Maila Mata. The Kav that comes in the form of Maila Mata, of a hierarchy of higher and lower. So what does the Simcha do? Since the Simcha goes into the inner core of the divine, that's obviously deeper than the Kav Chut. So there, when it flows from there, it transcends the structures that the Kav Chut create in the hierarchy of Seder Shtalshlus. Shezeh, these parameters of the Kav, Shayach rak begilei ha'orah d'mebchinas malchus de Ein Sof. These parameters are only Shayach, they're only possible due to, or when there is a reflection from a Malchus of Ein Sof. Remember, Malchus of Ein Sof, I said on top of the page, is the source where God envisions and allocates resources. There is an element of measure and allocation, also in the divine infinite light before the Tzimtzum, pre-Tzimtzum. That's where it's allocated. Then comes the Tzimtzum, and then the Kav, which measures that flow to each level. However, Simcha, as we're going to learn in a moment, goes higher than Malchus of Ein Sof. It goes to the core root, so he says, and then he continues, he's still continuing the process. And then that energy, after God allocates and defines the parameters, then the actual energy is concealed through the big first Tzimtzum, and then it comes into the Kav in a measured, and both the measure and the weight very defined. That's the regular flow of creation. However, when through Simcha you're reaching a place that's drawing from the inner dimension of Ein Sof, not Malchus of Ein Sof. We learned earlier in volume 1, in a few places, why is it called Malchus? There's no Malchus. It means it's so called, so to speak, the lowest level in pre-Tzimtzum itself is God already associating in his mind and his consciousness to existence. But Pnimius Ein Sof is higher. The Hainu B'chinas Keser Malchus the Ein Sof. If you're going to define it in spheres, the Keser Malchus, not Malchus of Ein Sof, but the crown of Malchus, which is like higher than the 10 hidden spheres. Remember, there are no spheres there. This is all figuratively speaking, just that we should have some language. So now it's reaching and being drawn from Keser Malchus of Ein Sof. Oz, what happens then? Oz Amshachi Shalei B'Hagdara V'Agbola the Kav Amida, B'Bchinas Kav Chut. Then the Amshach is not according to the boundaries and the parameters or definitions of the Kav Amida, of that line that draws the measuring rod, the measuring line, B'Bchinas Kav Chut, which is in a state of a kav, a line and a thread. What happened? But then what happens? And now, since it's coming from a place higher than this measuring, so then it's transmitted, this Gili Eir, in all of Ishtalshlus of Atzilus Bri Yitzir Asiya, Ad Lamato, all the way below, Shaloy Al Pisei de Ishtalshlus. Not according to the regular cosmic order and structure of Ishtalshlus, which is defined by the Kav Chut, which is drawn from Malchus of Ein Sof, that allocates and defines the parameters of existence. Now we've reached deeper within the Melech. So now he's coming out and revealing this extra surge, this abundance through the Holy Shtalshlus all the way down below. Only in Zman HaBayis, it was revealed, everybody literally saw it. We may not see it now, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. Definitely is happening. So I'll read till the end of the paragraph, then we'll stop. So he talked now about Yontav. Now he's going to explain Shabbos is similar idea. Shabbos too is a extra flow. 6 days of the work week. There you have a structure. Each day. So it says, so in the book of, I think it's Yecheskel, he talks about that the Beis Hamikdash, especially the Beis Hamikdash, it says that in the weekdays, There was a gate in the Beis Hamikdash. It was called the Shara Chotza Pnimis. So the Chotza is the we said the courtyard. So there's a courtyard. There's a gate going from the courtyard out of the Beis Hamikdash, away from the Beis Hamikdash. There's a gate of the courtyard that connects the courtyard to the inner part of the Beis Hamikdash. So he says in the weekdays that gate was closed. On Shabbos that gate was opened. What's the symbolism of that? What's the significance? So he says that's what it says. Going back to Chotzer, remember the gate of the king. So he said by Shabbos it says the Shara Chotzer Pnimis Apena Kodim, the inner gate of the Beis Hamikdash that Apena Kodim that faced east. What does that Kodim refer to? He says Bechinas Ein Sof Kadmeina Shalela. The word Kodim also means primordial, means the first, the earliest. So we're talking about a gate that's referring to Ein Sof Kadmeina Shalela. So the Eibishter Kadmeina Shalela, he's like the first, precedes all of existence. So the Peina Kodim is referring to that gate. So that gate goes outward, downward into existence. It also connects to the levels that are higher than existence. So Soger Yir Sheishes Shemei HaMaisa. That gate is closed in the 6 days of the week, or the 6 days of work, of Maisa. Shu B'chinas Sosum V'Helam B'Stimus the Ein Sof, the Eid Ein Sof. What means Soger? When the gate is sealed, it's referring to a concealment. That's what means a closed gate. You don't have access to what's behind the gate. So what is closed? That's the level Sosum V'Helam B'Stimus the Eid Ein Sof. It's closed up and concealed in the enclosure of Eid Ein Sof, which means the mystery of Eid Ein Sof, that's higher, is not accessible in the weekdays because the gate is closed. Shenikra Stimid the Kol Stimin. That level is called the secrets of all secrets. If you remember on the top of page 1262, he spoke about Simcha, that you reveal secrets that you don't reveal usually. So now you see why he said that in the Mashal. Because you're talking about a level that is secrets of all secrets that are not, that in the weekdays are not accessible. Ubiyema Shabbos Yiftach. Yema Shabbos, this gate is opened. The Shabbos Umoyedim, and he clearly saying that it's not just Shabbos, also the holidays. Meir Gili B'chinas Ein Sof Hasosum V'Nelam Shanim Shechagili B'Kol Mokim. Then, once the gate is open, this inner gate, so it's drawing and revealing to everything on the other side of the gate. What is it revealing? Ein Sof Hasosum, that which was the Ein Sof that was locked or concealed, that was closed and concealed, that should now be Nimshal B'Gili B'Kol Mokim. That energy should flow everywhere equally. 3 in the week, we're subject to the kav, the chut, so the flow is going, but it's in a very measured and structured way. On Shabbos and Moedim, that gate is open, which in different words, what he said before, the king goes out into the gate. That king that is always closed in his own inner chamber, inner sanctum, is coming toward the nation, the people. He comes out to the gate and sits in the gate, as the Zohar says. So there you have how Simcha is explained in higher worlds. The same idea Simcha does to us human beings, that it draws forth inner faculties and inner resources and inner strengths and inner secrets, and we go beyond our natural structure, so to Lamaila in the time of Simcha, the gates open up, so to speak, from heaven, and the level of Keser Malchus of Ein Sof, the levels that are beyond, higher than the energy that is going to be defined by structure through the Kav, that flows forth through ripples through all of existence, all the way down, Lamata Mata, the Kol Mokum, to every area and every place. That's how he explains Lamaila. Okay. So that was a full section. Let us stop now. Any questions, comments for more clarity?
That the Kav V'chut is made specially because we cannot tolerate. And when there is Simcha, then it's above all of this. You don't need the symptom, the Kav V'chut, and all of this. When is this going to happen?
So first of all, I wouldn't use the word tolerate. There's only one piece of it. The first most important thing to remember is that God wanted a structured universe. He did not create existence to not have structure. So the only way you could have structure is when you have parameters and limitations. It's like if you want different people, let's say you have different students, and the teacher has to teach different level students, he can't just flow one idea. The idea has to be packaged and spoon-fed to different students in different ways. Just like when you feed your children, a newborn is fed one way, and a younger child is fed, an infant a different way, and an older adult a different way. They could all be meeting the same meal, but they're different measures and so on. So there's no such thing as structure without definitions. So the Kav Chut plays the role of the Eira Gvul and the Koyach Gvul coming to create structure. Without that, there's no Tachtenim, there's no existence, there's no Daimim Tzemeach Chaim Medaber, there's no nothing, frankly. There's no structures. Everything we know about existence is about structure. Yes, it is true at the same time that if the energy, so-called, if the Kav Chut became faulty and it did not gauge and flow properly, it would be like electricity just blowing up all the appliances. It would be just like a flow of water that everybody's getting and it will overwhelm everyone. So the whole point is that you need this measure and so on. However, the whole point we're learning about Simcha is that there are times, he said, like Moedim, Yomim Tovim, and Shabbos. And there are other special times where the Eibishter, there's a Gilui that comes, a higher Gilui. That's what makes it a Yom Tov. Why do we have to celebrate on Sukkot or Moedim L'Simcha in general? Not because suddenly we're celebrating, because this is a day when gates are opened. And so the basis of Yiddishkeit is on Rosh Hashanah, certain gates are opened, on Kippur, certain gates. Here he's talking about Simcha. So the idea that you have times of the year, we have a special Eis Ratzon, if you wish, a time, an auspicious time, where these channels open from above down, and we make a keli through our Simcha, means that we have the capacity, but we don't marry off a child every day. That is special times, like he says. So right now he's talking about that special moment called Simcha. Can a person have 24/7, 365 day a year Simcha? It's another discussion. We didn't get there yet. Right now we're talking about the very practical element. What does Simcha do to a person? Remember the question, the operative question on top of page 1261 was, so he's explaining now that Simcha creates a possibility that a lower level should be able to access a higher level. As I said, the topic is not over. This is a big theme of Ayin Beis is this discussion, because we also don't want to eliminate. It doesn't say anywhere here that he wants the bittul. He doesn't say anywhere he wants to eliminate or annihilate the structure. He doesn't say anywhere that the Kav Chut stops being functional. He's saying there are times where we have this greater gili. Now we're going to learn more, and we're going to learn how do we balance that? Because the fact of the matter, after Tishrei, we said V'Yakov halach l'darkei, and we're not Simcha Teda now. This level of gili is befedish not here. Now, as far as experiencing it, in the Beis Hamikdash, it was experienced by Neshamas Lamata, he says. Today, either you have to be a higher, more sensitive, because like anything, someone asks you the question, what happened on Rosh Hashanah? I feel like it's exactly like the day before Rosh Hashanah. Or what happened on Simchas Teda? Many people will tell you they don't feel anything. Yes, they go to shul, everybody's dancing, so you feel it. That's because the environment is very spirited and energized. But you actually feel, if you woke up in the morning, Simchas Teda in the morning, and you didn't know it was Simchas Teda, would you feel a surge of joy? Maybe some neshamas are zeiche. But that doesn't change anything, because that's a question on everything that we do. Shabbos, Yom Tov, mitzvahs. The point is, we learn that every Yom Tov does bring a new hamshacha. Like every Rosh Hashanah, Chodesh. Someone just asked me, I heard your program, you said from Tanya that every Rosh Hashanah there's a new energy, unprecedented. So I was very excited. Now it's already a month, 2 months later, and I don't feel any new energy. Yeah, that's a challenge. Not feeling it doesn't mean it's not there. Like the famous story with the Rebbe Rashab, where he had these maskilim, these enlightened souls, these enlightened people who were skeptics, and they were like from the Haskalah movement, means the enlightened ones. They didn't have much faith, they had a lot of seichel. And they came to see the Rebbe Rashab. They knew he was a tremendous mind. And they asked him, how do you know there are angels? How do you know there are all these spiritual energies? We don't see them. So Rebbe Rashab asked them, how did you get here to Lubavitch? So they said, we traveled in a wagon. We had a wagon driver we hired. He had several horses. And we came, took a few days, and we came to see you. So the Rebbe Rashab said to them, what are the horses thinking? What were the horses thinking when they were carrying you and the wagon to come here? So they said the horses were thinking about Hubbard, about their hay. They couldn't wait to get to their station, to their destination, where they can get a good meal of hay. He said, what about the wagon driver? The wagon driver, he says, was thinking about the parnasa he's going to make. He'll get to the destination, he'll be paid, and have some income that he could bring back to his home and family and so on. And said, what about the people sitting in the wagon? What were they thinking? He said, we were thinking about the questions we're going to ask you, about malachim and so on and other things. So the Rebbe Rashab said in Yiddish, "Ade vertrachten haber, seien de malachim ke malachim nicht." Just because the horses are thinking about hay doesn't mean that the angels are not angels. In other words, just because you don't know that they're angels, because you're thinking about materialism and hay, doesn't mean the angels are not real. You could say, I don't see them, I don't feel them. But that does. Since when are you the final arbiter, the final say about what's real and what's not real? We all have myopic and limited vision. Anyway, going back to the topic here, he's talking about these levels of gilui, of simcha, to explain to us this higher level. It's not finished yet. This subject is going a few more pages at least, if not more. And ultimately, yes, the whole Ayin Beis theme is going to explain how we have tachtenim. Tachtenim must have structure. Tachtenim by definition means the lowest ones. That means it's lower than higher. That means that's a hierarchy. Tachtenim lashon rabim, plural, means there are many different levels, like the world in which we live. There's a full structured world. And still, it'll be a dira la yizbarach b'tachtenim. A dira yizbarach is Hashem Echad. Hashem Echad is beyond all of existence, and yet this will be a home for the divine. So the big question, which I've said many times, is the theme of Ayin Beis, the theme of all of Chassidus, and frankly, the whole theme of Kabbalah and even Torah in general, to create an interface, to integrate these two seemingly diametric opposite realities. That's exactly what we're going to. How do you infuse existence with higher states of consciousness without annihilating existence? So we've learned a lot about this. We learned about Atzilus and the Kav and the different interfaces, Bittul, the Tzimtzum, transforming the Tzimtzum. Now there's another piece in the puzzle, and I will put it in context as we go, as we learn ahead, that the context now is adding another ingredient called Simcha. That your Simcha helps draw down energies that are beyond the structure. But that's not, the goal here is not destroying the structure. The goal is that the structure should experience something higher than the structure. And Simcha is now the component that the Rebbe Rashab is introducing into the big interface equation of all of Ayin Beis. So that's basically where we're at right now. We're still in the middle of the subject matter.
Thank you very much. That's very good. In a different note, you spoke before, you explained it nice, based on the Rebbe Rashab about Shaar HaMelech. I never understood clearly what Shaar HaMelech. Now it gave me a good understanding.
Yeah.
He said so much about in Megillas Esther, Mordechai Yeshiv, Shaar HaMelech.
Yeah, remember, Shaar HaMelech is another interface. The Melech is here, Behechale, in his palace. The people are here, and a Shaar is a gate. Whenever you see Sha'arim, it's always a mamutza. That's what a Shaar is. It's a gate between two things, like a bridge. So whenever you say gate, that you could right away know it's a bridge between two realities. Here he explained it in a beautiful way through Chassidus, through Ein Sof, and so on. Yeah, even say Nun Share Bina, the 50 gates of understanding. They're gates, they're channels between one state and another. And Shaar generally is wide, where, for example, the Siv is Chachma is usually narrower. Shaar is a wider gate, and Shaar HaMelech is the widest. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else in our beautiful group here?
Not for now, Rav.
Okay. It's fine. It's very, very beautifully put. The Rebbe Rashab really laying it out nicely. So we can read a little.
Rabbi Jacobson, I know we're discussing the topic of Simcha, obviously the focus, but when we were talking originally about Moedecha, the level of Mesiras Nefesh of being able to pierce higher levels through giving over everything. When you think of that, you think of giving away one's life, for Hashem, so to speak. Is the Rebbe going to speak about that ability, that level of not achieving it through Simcha, whereas is the very elaborate discussion of how Simcha can achieve that, but how we can reach those levels of higher than structure through Moedecha, through
The answer is yes.
you will. Okay.
The answer is yes. First of all, the Rebbe Rashab, as you can imagine, is quite aware of what he said before about B'chol Me'edecha. I believe that he's going to bring these two together on page 1265 and on, exactly how they work together with each other. As I said, Ayin Beis is a long flow. So a lot of themes are not finished yet. They began, didn't complete it yet. So as I've done over these years, as we learned Ayin Beis, I try to keep both learning the new material, but also putting it in context of what we learned before. So he's going to go back to that. And one way or another, we're going to have to discuss both, because it was a big part of the theme was reaching B'chol Me'edecha, all-consuming love. By the way, the expression he used was Mesiras Ratzon. Mesiras Nefesh is actually dying for something. Mesiras Ratzon means you give, even if you're not physically dying, but you completely surrender, you completely give away yourself to Hashem. That's a very vital section in this whole discussion, and also in the interface. And of course, this goes back. That theme goes back. Oh wow, quite a while. Down on page 1253, 1254. So we're now like 10 pages later, but we'll definitely go back to that. I can assure you. And one way or another, I'm definitely going to address it, because it begs the question. You really want to see, how does Simcha work together with B'chol Me'edecha, and how does it work with Bittul and all the other interesting tools and resources that Rabbi Rashab gave us to create this interface. But you can imagine all of Torah mitzvahs is essentially meant to help us achieve this. Yeah.
Yeah, we touched on it with Rabbi Akiva.
Rabbi Akiva, what about him? What about Rabbi Akiva?
He was completely the Simcha, even when he was going through his ultimate horrible death.
Yeah, he always wondered when he would be able to give his life. But that was in a tragic circumstances where he was barbarically killed. That's not what's expected of us. That was a very, but yes, the Mesiras Nefesh part, correct. I will say one thing I want to just add. I've been teaching, I'm in the Tanya, my Motzei Shabbos class. So I'm up to chapter 4 now. And where he's talking about the levushim of Torah mitzvahs have a strength and advantage over the neshama itself. And actually learning this Ayin Beis has given me some insights. Now, I want to just say this. I think it's important to mention, and maybe be helpful both for the Tanya and both for the Ayin Beis. You see, a neshama comes down to this world, we know as a chelik elikam emal mamash. It's a divine entity with divine faculties, as the Alter Rebbe explains very clearly in Tanya. But it comes into a very dark world. I mean, this week's parsha, by the way, Vayetze Yaakov mibe'er Sheva vayelech Harana. Yaakov leaves the fountain of seven, which refers to Zah, the Sheva Midas, the fountain of seven, or seven fountains. He's going, and the neshama is coming down to Harana, which is the wrath of God down below. So neshama comes down into this world. The Orach Chaim says that. Not the Kabbalah of it, the Chassidus, but the idea of neshama. So neshama, with all its divinity and all its saturated with godliness, comes down into a dark world and has to contend with all the challenges. First of all, the animal soul, the entire world, a corrupt world. But we don't come unarmed. Besides the fact that the soul itself is divine, we also have divine resources. The Eibishter, thank God, gave us Torah and mitzvahs, and said, if you dress up your soul, and I'm using the word dress up intentionally, levushim, if you dress your soul, your divine soul, with my Torah and mitzvahs, in other words, you take your thought, speech, and action, and you use them to think about God, to speak about God, and to act, which is essentially all the mitzvahs go into that category, your neshama will have the power to not only overcome the challenges, but to reveal its own very natural divinity, and moreover, transform the entire world into a dira b'tachtein. So the neshama is obviously the divine entity that is the journeyer. We are the ambassadors. We're the shluchim. We're the shliach of Hashem to this world. But a shliach can come just with his own, say, yes, I'm God's child. That's what a neshama is. Bonim atam, you're God's son. You're God's child. So and a child is a piece of his father. But you're not the father in a revealed way because you're coming in a concealed state. The Torah and mitzvahs are the Father's limbs and organs, which are the way God manifests himself. And when we dress up our neshama in the garments of God's so-called limbs and organs, God's Torah and mitzvahs, we then achieve that level. In that sense, the levushim of Torah and mitzvahs are higher than the neshama because they are the resources that allow us to reveal that unity and connection. I'm saying it because the same thing is in this context when you say the world is created by the kav and midah. The neshama has to go through that. Neshama shenasati b'tahirihi atabarasati tzata atanafachtabi. It has to go through the structure because for us to transform this world, we have to engage with the world. We can't just do it from a mountaintop or from heaven. You know, you could say neshama could sit in Gan Eden and learn Torah and beam down, stream divine energy into the world. That's not the way it works. You have to come down into the world, engage with it. In the levushim, Yaakov has to dress in the garments of Esav and involved and speak the language and everything that we have to deal with, health, the corruption, the duplicity, the hell of a Hester. But we're given Torah and mitzvahs, which is like on a separate track, a divine resources, like divine tool chest, which is an expression of the divinity itself of godliness, as he manifests in the Ramach, in the Tayag Evari Malka de Kadisha, that allows us to bring that into the structured world of the Kavachut. And through Simcha Shal Mitzvah, he's saying now, also draw things that are higher than the structure. So I just wanted to put it a little into that context that as well may be helpful. Okay. So we shall stop here. End of the paragraph, page 1263. And I said this also to the Rabbi Shleimer, who asked me about this a bit as well. Okay.
It's a tough topic. It came out clear with that, more clear.